Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Infor Document Management webinar hosted by Anthesis. I think we'll get started. It's 11 o'clock, and if people join a little bit late, that's no issue. Just let everybody know that we are recording the session this morning. So if anybody wants to have access to the link after the session is finished later, of course we can share that with you. If you could keep yourselves on mute for the duration of the webinar, and then towards the end of the session we will have a quick Q&A, but please keep yourselves on mute for the benefit of everybody else on the line. I'm now going to hand you over to Mike Everingham, who will take you through the slides and the demonstration today. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks to everyone for attending this demonstration. My name is Mike Everingham. I'm an M3 and Idm consultant with Anthesis. This is the agenda that I'll be covering over the next 30 minutes. We'll look at Idm and Configurable Output Management, or COM as it's abbreviated. We'll look briefly at the Idm Output Management Word add-in. We'll also look at IDM's in-context features. I'll show you an example of a document approval process, which will also introduce you to the Mingle and Idm apps. And finally, we'll look at how you can use the Idm widgets. And then to round the demo off, we'll have a short time for questions and we'll put up contact details at the end. Because of the time constraint, I won't be covering the basic IDM functions, but Infor have published an excellent introduction to IDM on YouTube, and there's a link to the video here at the bottom of this slide. So, IDM and Configurable Output Management. Let me just load up my environment. So let's look at an example of COM. What we can do. In M3, I'll go to PPS 200 and find a purchase order that's ready to print. Here we are. Very briefly, this control here brings the context apps into or out of view. And if you keep your eye on the related information section here, we'll see what happens. This is where IDM uses the business context rules to associate documents with M3 data. So if I go ahead and print this purchase order, and if we go back to the B panel and look at the related information, we can see that we have a preview of the purchase order that we just printed. I've also received an email. You can configure the COM elements within M3 to send it via XML to IDM or receive via email. And this is where we start to see the real benefits of using IDM to share documents across the entire organization. We can present documents to users as soon as they're generated, as we've just seen, so that they have them to hand right there in the screens that they use as part of their roles. They don't have to switch applications or search cluttered network drives to find the documents they need. They're right there where and when they need them. And you can have multiple documents available as a searchable list if need be, and we'll look at that in a few minutes' time. So we'll come back and look at what users can do with these documents in the related information section in a moment. So let's look at the document we just printed, and all you have to do is click the document. Okay, so we're looking at a customized version of the standard PPS 601 PF printer file. let me show you what the previous version looked like. So if I just go to IDM, and if we have a look at this document, okay, so we're looking at the previous version, and apart from the small logo that we can see here, this is the standard PPS 601 PF layout. And for the purpose of this demo, with the limited time that we have, I wanted to replace the logo with a bigger, sharper image. I wanted to add an IDM copy watermark in red font across here. I wanted to hide the via address and invoice address sections if and only if the associated address fields are all blank. I wanted to change the POS label here to lines. And I also noted that for whatever reason, the delivery terms, delivery method, currency and payment terms sections weren't being populated correctly. So I fixed those two while I was there. So how did I do these things? I downloaded the IDM Output Management Word add-in from here. If I go to the Control Center and in the Development section in Downloads, we have the Output Management Word add-in. And once you've downloaded and installed the Word add-in, what you then do is find your PPS 601 PF template, click it, and that will open up in Word. We enable that for editing. And you can see here that this is, we have a new item on the toolbar at the top here called Infor Document Management. Now, I might need to log in. Just bear with me a second. So this section here is the Idm template, and this section down the left hand side here is the latest XML output file, which is what is generated when you print the purchase order within PPS 200. And what I did was I found the sections within the template that I wanted to customize. And in the IDM property editor, you add controls and set the behavior that you that you want to change. And in this case, I used XPath code to say that when any of these fields are blank, I want to hide this section. And I wanted to do the same with the invoice section here as well. And I made the changes to the logo, and I also added a watermark. So if we go back to our purchase order that we printed, we can see that those via and invoice sections have indeed been hidden, and the delivery terms are now populated correctly. We have the currency information, we have the watermark, and we have the logo. Of course, if you know XML well and are comfortable with developing documents using the XSLT tools such as XPath and XQuery, you could transform documents completely by building in logic-driven controls. So that's a very brief overview of how you can use IDM and COM to customize M3 documents, send them to IDM and present them to users in M3 using the IDM in context functionality. So let's now go back to PPS 200 and look at what we can do with the related information panel here. We can click the paperclip to add another document. If a document has already been set up in IDM, you can use that control to add a document. You can use the toggle here to switch between the picture view, which is what we're looking at, or the list view. Here we only have one item in the list at the moment. If you have related documents set up, because you can associate multiple documents as part of a bundle, we'd be able to look at the related documents using that control. This is what we click to look at the document in IDM. This is the purchase order as it is in IDM. And we have, if we click the three little dots here, we can share that over, for example, the chat application. We can download the document, we can download it as a PDF, we could email it to somebody if we wanted to, or we could print it. Now, let's assume that as an IDM administrator, the purchasing manager has asked you if it would be possible to use a supplier notes document that his team used to share information about suppliers, the kind of information that, for example, isn't currently held in M3. If I find the document and show you what I'm talking about. So here's an example. It's a hypothetical example of a document used to hold information that purchasing staff might need to know about specific suppliers while they're using PPS 200. I've already set the document up in IDM, so I'll show you what we can do with it. So if we go back to PPS 200, let's just remind ourselves of the supplier that we're working on, PY5001. And now I'll go to CRS 620. This is our supplier. At the moment, there are no documents associated with this supplier. And what I'll do is I'll click and drag an example or an instance of that document that we just looked at into this section here. I click upload and we see the document. And what's happened here is it's been automatically associated with our PY5001 supplier, and that's all done via the business context rules that we set up within IDM. Now, I'll go back to PPS 200, highlight my line. Let me just refresh that page. And now we can see we have two documents associated with this particular purchase order. We have the supplier notes that we just added to CRS 620. And we also have the purchase order that we printed a few minutes ago. And if you can toggle the view so that you can look at the list, so users can see exactly what documents are associated with each record. And the other thing that you can do in the picture view is you can use these controls to scroll through the list of documents that's attached. So now let's look at an example that incorporates an approval process coupled with tight security. I'll just clear the decks and close these screens, and I'll open up the item master. So let's assume that as IDM administrators, we've been asked to configure a solution that displays product images in the item master, but those images must be exposed to an approval process. When an image is created and added to the item master, it will inherit a status of initial, and only the IDM item manager, which is me for now in this demonstration, will be able to view it in the related information panel. So an approved person can add an image, but only the IDM item manager can view those documents until they've been approved. So I'll log out and then log back in as a general user who has the required permissions to add documents to IDM. So as a user authorized to create the image documents, I open up the item master and I select the record that I'm interested in to give it focus. And then I click and drag my image into the related information panel. I'll just locate that document on my system. I click upload. And at this point, the context app looks for the required business context rule, as we described earlier. And if it finds it for this document type, it automatically populates the attributes, in this case, just the item number with the item number in the record that I've selected here. And so the image is added to IDM and associated with this item. Before we go any further, I'll draw your attention to the first of two things that happened in the background. First, if we look at the document in IDM and inspect the attributes, we can see that it has indeed inherited a status of initial, which is what we wanted it to do. Now, if I log out and log back in as a general user who shouldn't be able to see this document, we'll test whether that's actually worked or not. So I go into M3, open up the item master, MMS 001. This is the record that we added the image to, and at the moment this user can't see the document, which is exactly what we wanted. Now I'll log back in as myself as the IDM item manager. Now, the second event that I said that there were two events that happened. I'll show you the second event now. The approval process is driven by a workflow, and I've received a notification here that I have a task, and that task is so the message is please approve item image for PY10001. So I'll click show the details, and I'll click show the image. So as the approver, I'm looking at this rather grumpy cat on the product packaging. And if I go back to the task, if I'm happy with that image, I'll click approve. And now if I log back out again and back in as the general user, we should be able to see the image in the item master. And sure enough, there it is. So that's a demonstration of how you can use IDM as part of an approval process. And let's just check the status within IDM, and you can see that the status has been changed to approved. And there we are. So you've seen that the approval process works. Now let's quickly repeat the process, but this time I'll show you how I'm able to use the Mingle and IDM mobile apps to receive the approval task notification, check the image, and then approve it. This time, to save time, I'll upload an image of a happy cat under my own user account. I apologise for the time it's taking to log in and log out. So I'll go back into M3 and open up the item master again. And I'll add a document to this item. I click upload. There we have a picture of our happy cat. So as we wait for the notification that a new item image has been added, I'll just load up a mirror of my mobile phone. Bring that into view. This is the Infor Mingle app, and this is the IDM app, and we're still waiting for this notification to arrive. Hopefully the technology isn't going to let me down. Still waiting. Right, okay. I didn't get the notification on the inbox icon up here, but I have actually received the task. And if we just check the time, it arrived at 11:26. So I'll just go back to M3 and load up my phone again. And if I open the Mingle app, click the menu at the top here, go to tasks. This is the task that's been sent to me. I'll assign it to me. I'll click Action and Approve. And what I should have done beforehand is check that the image looked good in the IDM app. I'll just do that now. If I click the sync icon here, recent documents, this is the image of a happy looking cat. Open the file. Am I happy with that? I've already approved it, but I could have rejected it if I wanted to as well. And I think that demonstrates how easy the Mingle and IDM apps are to use. They're very easy to get hold of and configure. Before I finish, I'll quickly show you the IDM widgets. And I set up a home page here. These are all IDM. These are all instances of the IDM widget. And here I've got a widget that shows me all item images. Excuse me, these are the two images that we created earlier on. This is the approved image, and this one hasn't been updated yet, but when it has, it'll also go into the approved monitor here. And then if I'd rejected any images, they would feature in this panel here in this widget. And we've also got a widget set up so that we can view supplier notes, and we might want to add that to a purchasing homepage. That draws the demonstration to a close. Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mike. Right now we'll have a very quick sort of Q&A session. So if anybody wants to ask Mike anything in particular, please manually take yourself off mute. We'll keep it quite brief, but if there's anything that you want to ask in more depth or detail, Mike will put a slide up shortly, and of course we'll be sharing the recording with all of our contact details if you want to reach out to us and set up a one-on-one meeting. Of course, we're very happy to do that. But if anybody wants to ask a question now, please take yourself off mute, and Mike will do his best to answer.
Hello, Mike. Here is Jindrich. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have one question. Could be this workflow in that IDM related or switched in few branches if based on some condition? For example, if it is the value is higher than some limit or something like that.
Yes, it uses Ion workflow, and if you know Ion workflow, then they're very versatile. You can include branches using decision nodes that responds to the event APIs that IDM uses, or you can use you're not restricted to using the IDM APIs. You can use other APIs as well, or bots even. So that was a very simple example of an approval process, and there were some things that could have been expanded. For example, what would you do if I'd rejected the image? And what should have happened in that case is that a notification would go back to the person who created the image with perhaps a suggestion of how it should be improved, and it goes back into the workflow again. But that was just a very simple example, just because we don't have much time, so
Yeah.
it needed to be simple. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answered my question. Yeah, and yet maybe extending of that. If we have the rule, for example, we plan to use this for approve of the purchase, and we have the rule that the person cannot approve the purchase for its person. So, for example, if some manager of some group want to purchase the computer, he can approve any purchase from any related people, but he cannot approve self purchase for him directly. Is possible to make such condition in the IDM too?
I wouldn't do that in IDM. I would do that within a normal ION workflow using business rules to check whether there was a limit on the expenditure level for that particular person, and using business rules, which you can incorporate as part of workflows. You can it's a bit like a decision matrix. So you load the details of the people with the different levels of expense that they're approved for, and the workflow will look at the value of the purchase order and compare it to each person. So I wouldn't do that in IDM. You could do it within IDM, but this is more an M3 type workflow. I think that the example that you've just described is more of an M3 process rather than an IDM process. But you could do it within IDM, and the way you do it within IDM is you create a value list. So I'll just very quickly show you. So we have value set, the value set option here. This is our item status, and the values are initial, rejected, and approved. This is what I was using in the example that we just worked through.
Yep.
So you set those up, and then as part of the creation of the document type, in the attributes, one of the attributes, of course, is status, and that is set to user value set, and that was defaulted as initial. So when I create a document of this document type, it automatically inherits the initial status. Yeah. And of course, it's these status values that are used within the workflow. So of course, you could make it as complicated as you wanted to, but regarding purchase orders, I would workflow the process using M3 information rather than IDM.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the tip.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any further questions from any other attendee?
No, that was really good. Thanks. My only thing I need to do is try and get on some sort of training course or have more of an in-depth look at the word option within IDM to see how we can change the documents, because that's the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, it's relatively new, and of course this is Infor's alternative to using StreamServe to customize documents, and I like it. I like the word add-in because it's not a WYSIWYG development tool in the way that you would know a WYSIWYG typically, but the way you use the IDM template and the XML, bring them together, and edit the sections within the template. Once you're comfortable with XPath, then it's actually quite easy to use. But like anything, any kind of tool like this, it just takes practice. It takes working with the tool over a period of time to become comfortable and familiar with what you can and can't do. And as I hope my demonstration showed, you can just by being able to hide those via address sections and the invoice address section, you can build in some intelligence as part of your templates. It's very versatile, it's very flexible, but like anything, the more you use these tools, the better you get, and the more complicated the changes you make they can be.
So do you think Infor are trying to get users to use more of the template that they're given? Because I know a lot of customers normally, totally change what they're given out of the box, and this looks like it's more around trying to use what you've got and just make some subtle changes as opposed to, massively change the document.
Using the word added, I mean, the other option that you've got is to, if you're good with XML, XPath, XQuery, all of those XSLT tools, then you could just do it. You could make the changes in code, but the word add-in gives you a good interface that you can work with, and you can use those XPath and XQuery skills as part of development if you wanted to. And they can, as I say, they can be as complicated or as simple as you want. But my understanding is that Infor are very keen for customers to start using these tools as an alternative to StreamServe.
No, yeah, I've heard that as well. I mean, I guess it's a lot to do with cost as well, where Infor can reap all the benefits of any licensing fees for IDM, as opposed to paying OpenText for the StreamServe licenses. So I guess I think that was a big part of it as well.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I'm not familiar with the pricing of these products, but what you've just said there, that doesn't surprise me. And of course, it has to be a consideration from a customer's point of view.
Yeah. Is this just a multi-tenant tool, or is this Infor now pushing this for all customers, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud? Or
well, obviously, it's not just multi-tenant. It could be on-prem and single tenant, but obviously it depends on what version of M3 you're using, whether you're using Cloud Suite, whether you're using, and of course the workflow elements are all dependent upon whatever version of Ion you're using. The
Sure.
apps are all mingle dependent as well. So I think the later the version, or the most recent, that if you're running the most recent versions of these products, then you can take full advantage of the tools that we've described here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any more questions?
Any further questions from anybody? Mike, could you just put the slide on with my contact details, just so it's on the recording, and then if everybody's happy, we can wrap up the session. No No other questions? Okay, well, listen, thank you everybody for joining this morning. I hope you've found the session of benefit. And like I said towards the beginning of the webinar, if you have any specific questions, we didn't want to ask you a question on the session, please reach out to either Mike or myself. We'll be happy to have or organise a one-on-one session with you. But thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
François Dranguet
is now exiting.